MDIBL's Community Health Laboratory, which she founded here in 2000. The Community Environmental Health Laboratory engages community members in water quality monitoring and marine restoration efforts, particularly the restoration of economically and ecologically important eelgrass beds in Frenchman Bay. Dr. Disney is the president of the Frenchman Bay Partners, which is a grassroots organization she helped found in 2011 to bring together the full spectrum of stakeholders to create an adaptive management plan for Frenchman Bay. Dr. Disney received her bachelor's and master's degree in biology and genetics from Penn State University and her PhD in zoology from Washington State University. Her environmental work in Maine has been widely recognized. She has received the Maine's Governor Award, the Visionary Award of the Gulf of Maine Council on the Marine Environment, and the Visionary Award from the Gardens for Humanity. And what I think you're going to hear in Jane's talk today is elements of everything you've heard in the previous talks this afternoon. And the title of her talk is Partnering to Save a Bay.
So we here at MDI Biological Laboratory are working together with partners all around the Bay in order to ensure a sustainable and healthy future for the Bay, and I'm going to tell you a little bit today about how we are doing that. The Frenchman Bay Partners have been working together over the last 3 years, and I think we have been working under this assumption that perhaps we can accomplish things at a local level that are difficult or impossible at the state and federal level. I first started to get involved with Frenchman Bay in some water quality monitoring work I was doing with citizen volunteers and school groups. And we were trying to find out from people around the Bay what they thought were the places that needed the most attention, the places where we needed to do the most work. And what we were hearing from property owners around the Bay was that eelgrass was missing. And being a water quality person, I wasn't really quite sure what this eelgrass habitat was. And so as I began to learn more, I realized that it was in decline around the Bay. And so what I set out to do was to find out how we could possibly restore this missing habitat. And there really was no way to do it. What we heard was that there was no permitting process in the state of Maine. There was really no way to cordon off a part of the bay in order to try to do some experimental restoration or some habitat research. And so this is when, recognizing that we were working in the commons and that we needed to have agreement with people in the commons, that we began to seek out others. This is actually a picture of one of the others that we needed to engage and have conversations with, because this is a mussel dragger that's dragging in the very area where we knew a lot of eelgrass needed to be restored. Interestingly, the name of this boat is the Pillager. And yes, there's a skull and crossbones on the bow. So how did we get started? We hosted a stakeholder meeting here in 2010, and it was the first such thing I had ever done. And I just called up everybody I knew around the Bay, and I said, let's get together, come here, let's have a conversation. And I could go on and on about what happened after that, but the rest is sort of history. We, in that early meeting where I just really wanted to talk about how can we restore eelgrass habitat, how can we find a way to do the thing the state says is impossible to do, we recognized that we had a shared need for taking action on lots of issues around the Bay. It wasn't just about eelgrass habitat. And so as we talked, we found out that there were concerns about erosion and development. Here's some more. Water quality issues, runoff from the land, nutrient inputs, fishing practices that might be harmful to the Bay. And so we realized that the conversation was a lot bigger than eelgrass, and that we maybe needed to get together a few more times to figure out how we were going to proceed. And then even in getting together and talking about the history of the Bay, not just the current status as we could see it, but what did we know about how the Bay used to be, we discovered that there used to be a heck of a lot more fish out there than there used to be. I mean, fish aren't even in the state landings data as for this Bay Area as a separate category. But we know that Frenchman Bay and this area supported a lot of cod. As a matter of fact, back in the 1800s, more cod were pulled out of Frenchman Bay alone than today are pulled out of the whole Gulf of Maine in a given period of time. So, so we know that this bay used to support a lot more than it did, and that doesn't even register when you just look around the bay at the current state of things. You kind of have to know where you've come from. So who are these people that have been coming to stakeholder meetings, looking at historical data, looking at the current state of things? There are all kinds of people. We really did invite everybody we knew. Property owners, fishermen, land trusts, research institutions, businesses, municipalities, town committees, schools and colleges, and the Zone B Lobster Council. So, and more, and I'll have them all listed at the end of the presentation. So what binds this diverse group of people together as we get together and decide how we're going to proceed on this bay? And this is a map of Frenchman Bay. Last time I gave a talk like this, I had people in the audience that said, we don't know where Frenchman Bay is. And Frenchman Bay is actually right off the property here, if you get a chance to go look at it later. This is Mount Desert Island. This is where we are now. And so this is the Frenchman Bay area out here that I'm talking about. And after much work with some consultants and some time out of our schedules, we did come to a consensus that our common mission is to ensure that the Frenchman Bay area is ecologically, economically, and socially healthy and resilient in the face of future challenges. This is the mission statement that guides our work. And we developed a shared vision as well. And the vision that we have for the future of Frenchman Bay is a healthy and sustainable future for Frenchman Bay where multiple users can enjoy the inherent beauty and benefit from the ecological and economic viability of the bay. So in order to do that, we have adopted a local approach to marine planning. And through this process, we believe we are shedding light on pathways to sustainable coastal communities. So this local approach is one that we learned from our collaboration with the Nature Conservancy. We are using a conservation action planning process. We have had much guidance from the Foundations of Success. Marcia Brown has been our facilitator through much of our work. And what I hear from her is that there isn't another example in the United States where, from the grassroots level, diverse stakeholders are trying to create something as complex as a conservation action plan on their own. There are examples where conservation action planning has been put in place, but our process of really trying to create this for ourselves has been a unique path that we've been traveling. So part of our success has been including diverse stakeholders. We believe that the people who live and work in coastal communities are in the best position to recognize and respond to changes in the local marine ecosystems that sustain their lives. And so here we are. We're attending meetings of the Regional Shellfish Committee that represents 7 towns and 200 shellfish harvesters on the other side of the bay. And we also are including schools. You'll see Bangor High School on our list of partners and some of their work at the poster session. And we are working with mussel aquaculturists and mussel draggers and whoever we can bring to the table to help us move forward to achieve our vision. We are creating an identity as a group, and we've developed this logo which depicts the entire Frenchman Bay here. And so this is a symbol that all of the partners can use on their PowerPoint presentations and in their documents that they're producing that are related to our joint efforts. So people around the bay, whether they're a local shellfish dealer or another institution, can identify their work with the Frenchman Bay partners. We know, as was mentioned in some other talks, that a key is identifying individuals to take a lead role. And these people are the champions that were spoken of earlier, the people that are taking it forward. So we do have a set of rules as well that we're operating under. We developed our own set of bylaws. You can find all this on our website that I'll talk to you about later. But through a process we all agreed upon, we have an annual meeting. These people were elected to an executive committee that is overseeing all of the work of the partners. And here we have Bridie McGreevy from the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center at University of Maine, Fiona DeConing, who owns a local mussel harvesting operation, and Bob DeForest, who is from Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and Chris Peterson from College of the Atlantic, and myself. So almost everyone except Fiona is here today, and maybe you'll see them at the poster session. So by choosing this method, I think we were really able to bind together in a way that might not have been possible otherwise. I have been involved in some marine planning work here in the state of Maine where the end product was a plan that sits on the shelf, the thing that nobody really wants to end up with at the end of stakeholder meetings and a lot of work. And I knew that we needed to find some kind of a method that we could agree on that would help us move forward in a logical way. And so this conservation action planning process that this is called the CMP, or Conservation Measures Open Standards. This is the document that we use to help us through our work. So, we have defined our team and our scope, which is the Frenchman Bay watershed. As you saw, we had a vision. We have identified targets and critical threats to our conservation targets. We've been working our way around this circle. We have been developing goals and strategies, all of these available on our website, and implementing actions. I'm going to talk to you about some of those. And then we have been monitoring and looking at whether or not things are working as we're hoping. And so this cycle we expect will continue forever. I don't think Frenchman Bay planning will ever be a thing that's done. It's a process that we're in and that we're all committed to. And so, again, we have learned through working with the Nature Conservancy and working with Foundations of Success that you can't do it all, you can't take it all on, and it was a lot of work to do this too. It's something I work with young students and teach them to do. It's to, prioritize some things that you can get started on so you can make some progress. And we've identified mudflats, eelgrass, bottom habitats, and diadromous fishes as our key conservation targets that we're going to operate around in the coming years. So we've been using diverse communication tools to try to keep everybody in the loop in our partnership and to be certain that all of our work is transparent, that nobody wonders what's going on behind closed doors or that some of us are making decisions for others of us. You can find the minutes of every meeting we've ever had on this site, every document we've ever produced. We actually have a place where people go online and they sign up as a partner, and that's how we know we have a new partner. And we do a lot of recruiting to go out and try and encourage people to go to the site and sign up as partners. And then we're able to easily communicate with them. We have their information, we have their email, and they can communicate with each other too by logging in and clicking on which partners they need to communicate with. It's a place for us to announce our successes so people see that something's getting done, and a place where we can share events. I mean, there's a lot more understanding of what's going on around the Bay now than there was 3 years ago through this website. Recently, as you can see, we received a small grant from the Maine Community Foundation. One of our partners became our fiscal sponsor because we're not a nonprofit. And through this, the Regional Shellfish Committee is able to address what we are calling our 610 project. That is, there are 610 acres of restricted clamflat due to bacterial pollution on our bay, and our goal is to get them all open. So we've actually been creating new tools as needed, and this one went up this summer, eelgrassinmaine.org, because as hard as we've been working on the eelgrass issue here, we had a huge eelgrass decline this year. So we were able to actually mobilize very quickly on this change in the Bay and try to engage not only people around the Bay, but people around the state of Maine in telling us where are you seeing it, where are you not seeing it, so we can understand how universal and widespread this problem is. And we're providing tools that serve diverse stakeholders. So in creating this tool, which is an online interactive Frenchman Bay Atlas, we have been able to provide some tools to municipalities and to schools and to research institutions that, that they all are very grateful to have, so that everyone's starting to see the value of having a group like the Frenchman Bay Partners that can take on projects like this. This one was spearheaded by College of the Atlantic, and that's where you can find this. We also have paper copies of this atlas available that we distribute to people interested in having a copy of them. So how do we sustain our partnership? How do we keep this thing going after 3 years? I like to say that we're embracing the AmeriCorps motto, which is getting things done. So we have had many AmeriCorps volunteer leaders who have actually come and worked to help get this fledgling project off the ground, and they have been amazing young people who bring all of their energy, and guess what, their technology skills. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and they have shown us the way because they know how to put in a lot of hours and get a lot of work done. So here's some of the things we are getting done, and I think the more projects that we have off the ground, the more interest and buy-in there is, the more people want to get involved because they see there's something to do. There's something getting done. So we have been restoring eelgrass around the bay by engaging people in tying eelgrass to grids and putting eelgrass out. We are monitoring the success of every project, and so we look at whether or not eelgrass is coming back or how much more of it we have over time, and displaying these results to people so they can see, yeah, something can be restored, we can make a difference. We're using mapping technologies to show where things are improving, and in terms of the mapping around the bay, we're able to show people that we've got a handle on what we had historically, we have a handle on what we have currently, and so we are developing goals that make sense and are realistic for our area. One thing we didn't expect to have happen, but is happening, is that we've turned out to be the facilitators around the bay of all kinds of what otherwise might be contentious situations. But since we've been practicing this art of conversation and collaboration, we're sometimes able to mediate when difficult groups get together. So when I say difficult, I mean they're in a difficult situation because of conflict and bay use. So we have mussel harvesters here, and we have clam aquaculturists, and we have wild shellfish harvesters. And we have them, and Department of Marine Resources, and we actually have a wormer there, I think, all at the same table, complaining about each other for years, and now they're in the same room together, having a complex conversation about what areas on the bay are important to them. Up until this point, I'm not really sure that everyone knew which areas this fellow was dragging in, or which areas this guy was clamming in. And so they didn't really know when they were crossing paths and destroying each other's little conservation projects or getting in each other's way. So I think that these kinds of conversations have been key to making people believe that being a part of Frenchman Bay Partners is really worth any time or effort that may be involved. So Maine Coast Heritage Trust created all the maps and hung them on the wall. And we had somebody from Island Institute in who was like running a live GIS mapping system. And so as people made areas apparent on this map, they were being layered into a new map. So at the end of the day, there was a map everybody could agree on. And that was just unprecedented around our bay. And those are the kinds of things that we're able to facilitate. In addition, some of us on the bay have different expertise than others of us on the bay. We have Chris Peterson here from COA, but he's also the chair of the Marine Resources Committee in Bar Harbor. And long on this side of the bay have we been surveying our clam flats and been figuring out what clam populations are doing. But as the Regional Shellfish Committee was getting started on the other side of the bay, we were able to transfer some methodology and help them get a handle on clam populations there. And these Clamflats survey results really can help us think about what we need to be doing for the future, whether or not we have clam recruitment problems or whether or not we have over-harvesting problems. I mean, here you're seeing a lot of little clams, but not enough to harvest here. And in a future survey that the Marine Resources Committee in Bar Harbor held with other community partners, they're able to show, well, over time, you can get some of these clam populations back, but it might involve closing some areas for a period of time. So collecting data and sharing data and help people understanding that by implementing these projects and these practices, we actually can create change on the Bay is encouraging to people. And then recently, one of those young AmeriCorps volunteer leaders who was interested in finance sat down and wrote an economic report on the Bay and uncovered some really interesting information that has also been really important in terms of getting municipalities on board and really interested in becoming Frenchman Bay partners. And in this instance, she was able to really map out the value, the total value of different clam flats around the Bay, and even taking a look in terms of productivity at the value per acre. Now, some of these areas, like Partridge Cove, which has the highest value, actually is closed to clamming due to pollution. So one of the values of the whole Frenchman Bay Atlas is that we are pretty clear on where all these closure areas are, and we are pretty clear on which ones we have some economic data on and which ones we don't. And we can start to plan on which of these areas we think we could get open. So by sharing information, data, results of projects, we're improving ecological aspects of Frenchman Bay because we know it directly affects local economies. And then in terms of these agreements, these are what are called by the Nature Conservancy informal conservation agreements. We used to have handshakes, and now we have people signing maps. So I'm pretty excited that, that we have mussel harvesters willing to actually help us hash out areas where we could do some conservation work or some eelgrass replanting, or they've actually helped us identify areas that would be good donor sites, and they're willing to not drag in these areas so that we can use these as donor sites. And so here we are at this point. We have some agreements. We have some good projects on the ground. We have some technology working with us. We have a lot more partners coming to the table. And our next steps are to widen the circle of stakeholders engaged in the Frenchman Bay Partners. We're looking to the business community. We know that all of these habitats have value to local businesses, and we want to help them understand what those are so they come into the fray and help us move forward. We're working on the sustainability of our group and our planning process. And part of what's helping with that is some research going on at the University of Maine on our process. We're getting good feedback on how we're working together from Bridie McGreevy and her crew at the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center. We're looking at creative funding models for implementing projects around the Bay, and we are looking at market-based approaches. And so I feel like everything I've heard today has really been helpful. And we're intending to share our model regionally, nationally, and internationally, which actually some of that's already going on, as Bridie just got back from Sweden. So these are some of the lessons as we share out the model that we think are important to take from everything that's gone on in 3 years. That diverse stakeholders are best served by a Bay plan they develop themselves. That identifying and empowering a local leadership team is crucial to progress. That it's important to consider both economic and ecological concerns in order to really be inclusive. Setting realistic goals based on scientific data facilitates action. So we have just 4 conservation targets right now. We have some very realistic, although ambitious goals. Reducing the lag time between planning and implementation creates buy-in. So we are, getting projects rolling even though we haven't, completed the whole cycle of the conservation action planning process. And we know that communication is imperative to the success of a local approach to marine planning. So at this time, these are all of the partners that are on our website, and the list is growing. And a large part of this work was funded through the Alex C. Walker Foundation and the Nature Conservancy. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
We have time for a few questions.
Yes,
I always have a question.
that's okay.
With the mic, I can just speak, maybe.
Yeah,
So,
she's coming down.
first, to congratulate you for providing this model that does have much broader implications. If you can make it work somewhere and show success, it is just cause for hope.
Mm.
And that I really salute.
Thank
Haha.
you.
I just have a couple of quick questions. One is about that economic model that was done. Is that just based on the extractive, measurable, like how many pounds of clams and how many pounds of fish and so on? Or are there other values that can be translated into dollars and cents, such as the quality of the bay as a reflection of what real estate is worth, or what the quality of life that people are attracted here because it's in good shape versus, or it's in improving condition versus declining health?
Yeah.
And the second part of this question is about choosing areas for protection. I've worked a little bit with fishermen in Martha's Vineyard and asked them, since they know, anybody knows if you've been in the fishing business for more than 6 months or so, that populations are declining, that the ocean is in trouble, their livelihood is at risk. So, okay, you're a fisherman. If you were to choose, think like a fish, where would you choose to protect if you want there to be more fish? Mm-hmm. No fish, no fishermen. And fish depend on having a healthy system. So the same would apply to clams or anything else.
Right.
If you were a clam, what parts of the bay would you protect as if your future depends on it?
Mm-hmm.
Some of these areas apparently have been closed because of bacterial infection, unhealthy systems. Mm-hmm. What effort has been directed toward choosing the best places to be a clam and protecting them?
Yeah.
And just generally, what are the criteria, and
Well,
how much is being protected and how much is sort of open for exploitation?
Right. Well, to answer the first part of your question, we recognize that we want to draw all of these different metrics into our understanding of the economic value of the bay. It's easier to get data on the value of landings and harder to really get good information on the value of the ecosystem services. We have found some studies, for example, on the value of eelgrass out of Florida. I think that they have such a huge tourist economy. I don't think it was a fair extrapolation to say, yeah, it's a $9 million per acre value. So we realize that people are working up these kinds of metrics, and this was a preliminary economic report, but we hope to be there in the future. And because we think that this is where we'll get the buy-in from the developers and the real estate agencies and the people on land who need to recognize this island as a limited area, and we need to figure out, how much is enough so that we still have this shared resource that for a lot of people, the value in it is its beauty and is its intrinsic value. And for other people, they don't even understand how they're being served by some of the estuaries that are cleaning water for them and what have you. So all that economic information needs to be worked on and communicated, number one. And your second question, I think there's been good work going on the bay, starting even before this bay planning process here in Bar Harbor on clam conservation. So Chris Peterson has spearheaded a lot of this work with his students from College of the Atlantic, and we do close areas for conservation. So we have some rotating closures that go on so that areas can recover. No, we don't have any, we have some that end up permanent because there's a sewage treatment plant that So, and we do know that there are huge clam populations in some of those coves, and they probably are seeding the bay. But those intentional set-aside areas haven't happened. The most intentional set-aside areas that have happened have been around the mussel dragging, where 248 acres or something like that has been set aside as no drag zones, and they've signed onto a map and said they wouldn't drag there, which is really historic here. It's the start of a conversation, and we realize we're working from the grassroots up. At some point, there does need to be some state-level buy-in to our process. We need them to communicate. We've already asked them to communicate around the state to other mussel harvesters from outside of our area, because everybody owns Frenchman Bay, not just the people that live around Frenchman Bay. And so
Not just those who drive it.
and that's right. That's right. So I think we are working with the Regional Shellfish Committee across the bay, and they too are starting, a series of rolling conservation closures. So people are recognizing at least that things need a rest, if not set aside forever. Yeah.
And since I have the mic, two things that make the process easier. One is that the state of Maine, for some resources, allows more local or regional management. And so clams can be regulated at the town level. Anadromous fish alewives can be regulated at the town level. Lobsters are regulated regionally. And those models really help because they have bottom-up approaches. The lobster industry is fairly classic because a lot of the regulations in terms of size and putting females back actually came from fishermen. And so those things are really, really helpful. So that's just one point, is that some of the regulatory structure actually helps. The second thing is getting to the question about ecosystem services, and I don't know if commodifying is the right word. I'm not being an economist, but I think that although I appreciate the idea of putting a dollar value on ecosystem services, it also scares me to death at times. Because if I can put a dollar value on something, I'm in some way, to me, implying that it can be bought or sold. And I actually think there are other currencies that we need to think about that go beyond just a dollar value, because sometimes there's a currency that has a value that can go beyond that. There's historical, there's paintings that I don't think somebody should be able to buy and destroy, right? So I don't think, even though you can buy it, that you can actually own it and have it. And so I like the idea of ecosystem services and pricing it, but on another level, I really think that we have to think about currencies other than dollars.
What's it worth to breathe?
Just wanted to understand a little bit about what is being done to connect to. There are some state-level agencies that are involved with assessing the usage of the bay in the conditions based on red tide zones. What's being done by the group to better understand the impact of the red tides in the bay?
Well, so we are staying focused on our 4 conservation targets and not really specifically branching into other issues, but individual partners do have more diverse interests, and so some of these things get covered by individual partners instead of the Frenchman Bay partners as a group. And Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory is a partner with the Department of Marine Resources in doing the red tide monitoring around Mount Desert Island. So there are other groups like ours, like the Biolab group, that does the red tide monitoring up and down the coast of Maine, and we serve as a first alert system, letting them know when we get increases in red tide organisms in the bay. And recently we've partnered with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and they were just here last weekend because we have an interesting bloom going on, and they're trying to help document the extent of that bloom with us and also identify the actual species, down to species level, what the organism is.
Does the Department of Marine Resources, that state-level agency, are they eager or interested in working more closely with the new organization?
Yes, I think the DMR is interested. At this point in time, they've made it clear that they are not going to in any way mandate any of our decision-making and that they are standing in the wings a little bit, but they've been supportive in terms of showing up at our meetings. Note that they were at the mussel harvester, clammer, wormer meeting and helping to facilitate our conversations, making sure we all really understand what the regulations are and the context in which we're trying to make some changes. And they also have been, helpful in these clam surveys and helping us to work up data and understand the value of these Clamflats. They also now are on the advisory committee with our 610 project. And they think it's great that there's a group that's now moving forward that agenda to get these failed septic systems fixed and what have you. So I think in some ways they're starting to feel grateful we're there, helping to come up with some funding to complement their limited funding to get projects done. They're not listed as a partner, but the local area DMR biologist is a partner as an individual. So I do think that although they felt as a state agency, it wasn't maybe appropriate to be a formal partner, informally, they're with us. Yeah. Oh yeah, we have one here. Peggy, it's coming right behind you.
I was talking to somebody recently about the eelgrass, and they were inferring that recently there had been difficulties with dieback. Can you tell me about that?
Well, yes, I can. So it seems like the eelgrass in the Upper Bay chose not to come up this year, and that included a lot of our restoration areas that were doing well over the last 6 years. And but the eelgrass in the Outer Bay seems to be intact. So
Okay. So where is the line drawn? Outer Bay in
I
Inner
would
Bay?
say part of Taunton Bay is in.
Pardon?
Part of Taunton Bay.
Taunton Bay?
Part of it is still intact, and then I would say everything out, like Stave Island is intact, the Bar area, all the way out to the Outer Bay.
But the sort of the Middle Bay part?
Right, Lemoyne, Trenton, upper around Thomas Island, Hadley Point, the shoreline all the way down to Hulls Cove, complete
And nobody
collapse.
knows why?
No, we're working on that as hard as we can
Yeah.
right now.
Is this true just locally, or has that been the case, say, in Rhode Island or someplace?
Well, definitely Rhode Island has had its issues, but we think they're very different issues.
Different issues.
Because of the water quality. We have good water quality here, and we haven't had a water quality shift, aside from the fact that 2012 was the warmest water temperature in the Gulf of Maine in all the years of recorded history. But we're not sure why that affected the Upper Bay so much more than the Outer Bay and some other areas. Down in McCoy Bay, they also had a huge loss. And so what we think there might be some factors, multiple factors coming together. We're looking at disease, but we're also looking at invasive green crabs, which have been really decimating some areas in Maine and Canada.
How disheartening.
I know. But at least we have a Frenchman Bay Partners group to address the issue. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
I don't need it, Mike. Just a quick question about in view of trying to duplicate this fantastic model elsewhere. It seems amazing to me that it has not been duplicated, and it should be. If you're not a 501c3, how do you get your funding? And what is the sort of the nitty-gritty of your organization in terms of, obviously, all the stakeholders have some fiduciary interests, so you can't be a not-for-profit, but how are you organized?
Well, right now we have an executive committee, and the executive committee oversees subcommittees, and we've organized all of our subcommittees around the conservation targets. So we do have a mudflat committee. All volunteer, except I would say that there's a lot of institutions that are providing some staff time to people to get together. So I don't really know how much College of the Atlantic or Maine Coast Heritage Trust is really dedicated, but I seem to have Bob DeForest anytime I need him to come to the table. Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center, clearly. They actually there was an EPSCoR grant that was recently written, and funded, very exciting, collaborative project with University of Maine, College of the Atlantic, University of New Hampshire, and Keene State College. And Bridie McGreevy was written in as a 2-year postdoc who will solely focus all of her postdoctoral research on the Frenchman Bay partners. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, is that right? Or part of it? Part of it. All right, never mind. But a good part of it. And Chris Peterson, I think, got a little bit of funding in that EPSCoR grant in order to have like an intern or assistant working closely with him on looking at these clamflat closures. So like each of us are like through our institutions or through partnerships, sub-partnerships within the partnership, finding grant money in ways. The 610 project was one that was actually funded, you know, sort of to the whole group, and the Hancock County Planning Commission took on the fiscal agent for that project. We've been in touch with Maine Community Foundation that feels like they could hold a donor-advised fund for us, but you need $25,000 to initiate a donor-advised fund. So we are having, you know, conversation amongst us all the time, like who goes for this grant, who goes for that grant, who gets written into that grant, how much are we budgeting for this and that, but these are project grants around these targets. So we've been able to do that, interestingly. Alex C. Walker Foundation has been the one that has been very interested in just keeping the, you know, partners going as a unit. So it's not a particular project, and most of that has come right here to the biolab, but then I've used that money to bring in these AmeriCorps people, and it has paid part of my salary and involvement in Frenchman Bay Partners. So it's very moving, fluid, interesting process that we're going through to make this happen without being a separate 501c3.
What's further evidence that success requires a charismatic and committed
Thank you very much.
One last question here.
Yep. My name is Michael Good, and I've been in touch with Jane. I'm one of the partners. I'm the founder of Acadia Birding Festival, and we're trying to figure out now with Jane we just gave our first environmental stewardship award of $500 to Frenchman Bay Partners. So we hope to kick off this whole discussion about how they're going to get funding and who's going to be the fiscal agent and all of those things. So I really appreciate being able to give money to a really important cause here. I think this is where change is going to happen at this level, and I can't thank Jane enough for all her work. So thank you very much.